but I didn't even know that this was happening. So yeah.
Well, it just came together the last couple of days for sure. Yeah.
You know, Simchat Torah seems to me like 5 centuries from now.
I know.
It's like, what's that? When is it coming?
That's
Is that
why
next year?
that's always true when you're preparing for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You can't think about Simchat Torah. So that's why it's good to have it all set before Rosh Hashanah starts.
All right. My watch says 8 o'clock. Is that what everybody has?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, very good. So without any further ado, I'm going to tell you that we are in front of an extraordinary session today. It's extraordinary because the piyut, the Selihot, El Melekh yoshev al kise rahamim, that will be explained very soon, it has the iconic words of Adonai, Adonai al Rachum Bechanun that we recite during the Chagim and holidays, Shalosh Regalim. And in front of you is going to be our teacher this evening. It's somebody that is very, very dear to my heart. Elias Rosenberg was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He's a graduate of the cantorial school Bet Asaf at the Seminario, the Latin American Rabbinical Seminary. And Cantor Rosenberg, who's very, very young, since 2007, has been the Chazan of Temple Emmanuel, a very, very prominent conservative congregation in Newton, Massachusetts. And Cantor Rosenberg is the New England Region Chair for the Cantors Assembly, a past president of the New England Board of Cantors. He's also the president of the Latin American Chazanim Assembly. And when he doesn't sleep, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day, he's also a cantorial coach at Hebrew College in Boston. In 2016, he was a recipient of the Masorti Olami Hidur Mitzvah Award, the first cantor from Latin America to receive this honor. It's extraordinary to have him with us this evening. And without further ado, I think instead of me talking, it's going to be so much better that he actually leads us. So Elias, I'm going to pin you here. So you are the center of this upcoming 20-30 minutes. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, my dear friend Ramon. Good evening, everybody. Just for you to know, you'll hear an accent coming from Ramon and I, and you'll have subtitles at the bottom in case you don't understand what we are saying. That was meant to be a joke. Anyways, so the honor and the pleasure to be here with you tonight is all mine. Ramon has been mentor for me in my life and in my career, somebody that I always aspire to be. I'm a little taller, my voice is a little deeper, but his talent, he's an accomplished Chazan, so talented, guitar player, musician, choir director, you name it, Ramon is there. And he leads by example with all these masterful programs that he puts together. So really, really the pleasure is mine.
Thank you.
So tonight, let's work a little bit on this beautiful prayer called El Melekh yoshev al kise rahamim. Now, this is a prayer that comes before a very important prayer that we have in the Selihot series that Ramon just mentioned, that it's Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Bechanun. Now, let's begin by talking a little bit about the origins of these paragraphs and the meaning of them. You probably heard over these sessions that Cantor Ramon has been doing that the Selihot series is a collection of penitential prayers, the work of liturgical poets, Paitanim, that will be the name, who flourished during the 10th centuries following the close of the Talmudic era. Now, this is very interesting because originally the service consisted of several groups of biblical verses, and all of them would finish with the recitation of Adonai, Adonai, El Rahum Behanun. Another name for that prayer is the 13 attributes. Now, El Melekh Yoshev, which is the prayer that we are going to think and talk and sing tonight, that comes before, was written more or less in the 5th and the 6th century. And it was composed as a prelude to the recitation of the 13 attributes. Later on, in Geonic times, the service was further expanded with piyutim. Now, as also Cantor Tassat, Ramon, do you prefer Ramon, Cantor Tassat, Cantor Ramon, Cantor R?
Everything is good.
Okay. My dear friend Ramon mentioned before, this paragraph Adonai Adonai, it's not only recited in Selihot, but it's also recited throughout high holidays, and also during the Shalosh Regalim, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. The 13 attributes, or the Shlosha Esrei Midot, come from the source of Exodus 34, verses 6 and 7. As I mentioned before, the 13 attributes are recited after this prayer, Melekh Yoshev, that was written in the 5th and 6th century. Now, the practice of reciting Adonai Adonai in the Shalosh Regalim, that was something that was created by Isaac Luria in Tzfat, in Safed, in the 16th century. And it was originally intended only for the month of Elul, the one that we are now, but in time it was extended to Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashana, and eventually the 3 festivals. Now, for those who are familiar, we have something during the Hebrew calendar that is called a 4 minor fast days. And as I mentioned before, Adonai Adonai comes from Exodus, from Parashat Kitisa, and that is a paragraph that we recite every time we read Torah in the minor fast days. Ramon, you will correct me. I'm mainly speaking for the Ashkenazic tradition, obviously.
That's correct.
I understand that Sephardim have different customs, so feel free to jump in and tell, how the customs are done. So what is really fascinating and interesting is that if you ever attend one of those services, the minor fast days, and the Baal Koreh, the person who is reading the Torah, gets to that point, in the Ashkenazic world, the tradition is that the Baal Koreh needs to stop and let the congregation recite Adonai Adonai Rahum Mechanun with the Tamei Mikra, and then the Baal Koreh repeats that. And let's talk about a little bit more about the origins of this biblical verse. The 13 attributes originated in the biblical account of the golden calf. All right, that is the source. There we learn that Moses, prayed for forgiveness for Israel for having committed the acts of idolatry, and God forgave them. When prayed once more, Moshe asked, "Show me your glory." God's response was to make known to Moses all his goodness, and basically recited the 13 attributes. So in other words, this section of Selihot repeats Moses' prayer to God to forgive Israel's sin in creating a golden calf, and for Israel other transgression in the desert, in the hope that our prayers, as were the prayers of Moses, will be also answered by forgiveness. Now, Ramon, are you able to share in the screen the text?
Coming up.
Beautiful.
Yes. Just a second.
In the meantime, since you are doing that,
Yeah.
I see in the wonderful people who are attending this group, I see Ariel Rosen. And Ariel Rosen is a fabulous musician in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. Let's see, is Ariel there? Yes, Ariel over there. Hey, nice to see you, my friend. Hola, Ariel. When I was 11 years old, I did my first step singing in synagogue, and Ariel was the musical director of that congregation in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I remember vividly. he taught me before the service to sing the stanza of Lechadodi Idnari. He taught me the music like 45 minutes before. I practiced it and I sang it during services. And officially, Ariel, that was my entry to synagogue. So a memory, fond memory that I'll remember my whole life. And thank you for that.
Un abrazo muy grande, Elías.
Thank you, gracias. All right, so you see here the text. El Melekh yoshev al kise rahamim, mitnaer b'chasidut, mochel avonot amot, mavir rishon. If you pay attention, the third paragraph, Adonai, Adonai, is the paragraph that I was mentioning before. Thank you, Ramon, the 13 attributes of God. And these two paragraphs that we have before are actually this prayer that was written in the 5th century as a prelude. Now, let's talk about some of the things. Ramon, if you want to go down to the translation of the text, excellent. Now, there are different sources, and in some of the text, believe it or not, the Hebrew varies a little bit. And let's read a little bit about this translation of the prayer we are talking about. Let's begin with the main one, which is Exodus 34. The Lord God is gracious and compassionate, patient, abundant in kindness and faithfulness, sure in love for 1,000 generations, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and granting pardon. Now, before that, on the top, we read, our God and King, turn upon compassion, rules with loving kindness, forgives the transgressions of people. So basically, it's kind of like an extension of what is going to say later on in Exodus. Now, if we read the Hebrew says something like, El oret alanu lomar shelosh ezre, which is not translated correctly there. So basically, it should say something like this. God, you taught us how to recite the 13 attributes of your name. Let's talk about a couple of little things, so then we'll have some time to sing. Now, El Melekh yoshev al kise rahamim basically says that God sits on the throne, and basically what the rabbis taught us is that God is said to have two types of different thrones, the seat of judgment and the seat of mercy. The seat of judgment, the one in Rosh Hashanah. The seat of mercy is the one in Yom Kippur. So rahamim is the one we use. Now, we talked about the El Oret Alanu, basically that God taught us the 13 attributes. And this biblical verse is a little ambiguous as to whether it was Moses or God, the one who recited. I like this source of the Babylonian Talmud in Rosh Hashanah 17a and b that says that this was probably meant for Hazanim, no? Just to believe that we are important. That Rabbi Jonathan describes God as wearing a talit, like a Hazan, like a cantor, and showing Moses how to pray. In a way, teaching him how to pray and how to recite these words. If we go a little bit, Ramon, if we go to the second line, it says Ma'avir Rishon Rishon. That will be on the third word from right to left at the very top. If you go at the very top, there you go. Second line, third word right to left, Ma'avir Rishon Rishon. And what does it mean? Basically says one by one. According to the Babylonian Talmud, God counts only one sin at a time. Thank you God for doing that. And if the totality of our sins were all counted together, we might be judged negatively. So God forgives each sin one by one. A couple of other things. Marbe Mechila, it's the, exactly, beautiful. You are on top of everything, my friend. Marbe Mechila, which could mean increasingly grant pardon. Not only does God forgive those who sin out of carelessness, He even forgives rebels who sin out of defiance against him. It's interesting. And one thing regarding the Ma'avir Rishon, Marve Mechila Lechataim, Rashi says that God accomplished this by removing sins one by one, meaning that if one's good deeds are equivalent to the sins, God removes them, the sin from the balance, so that the side of virtue overweights the side of sin. So those are important things. Ramon, is there something you want to add to the meaning and the explanation of this?
Just to really say that the rahamim, that the sages were very benevolent with us, because the pasuk that you mentioned, Adonai, Adonai al Rachum Bechanun, doesn't end with the words Vechata Venakeh.
Velo nakeh.
Velo nakeh. In other words, if you look at the pasuk in complete, really there is no cleanse. There is simply an understanding that when one has made a mistake, an error, one has to pay for it, and that's basically the end of it. But the rabbis, in their immense mercy and understanding our vulnerability, they really did something revolutionary, which I think it is to basically stop a pasuk, a verse, before its natural end, and they did it for this sense of grace and rahamim, like you were saying.
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that, Ramon. It seems like the original verse in the Torah, it's a little harsh, and then in order to appeal more to the congregants and to regular Jews, that was the one that the rabbis decided to incorporate in the liturgy. So we have about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Oh my God, this goes so quickly.
Go on.
All right, good. So I'd like to sing now, and I brought 2 different settings of this beautiful El Melekh Yoshev. As you can see there on top, the first one belongs to Shlomo Ravitz. And let me give you a little background who Shlomo Ravitz was. Shlomo Ravitz was a chazan, a composer, and a musician, a choir master. He was born in Minsk in Russia. Unfortunately, 2 of his siblings and a lot of his relatives perished in Auschwitz. When he was 15 years old, he went to study in Odessa and Kiev. Then he became the chazan of Riga, Latvia synagogue, and then South Africa. And then when he was about 50 years old, he moved to Israel. He made Aliyah to Tel Aviv, and he wrote beautiful music. Now, one thing that I'd like to mention, which is really cute, is that in those days, we are talking about 1935, in Tel Aviv, there was something called the Central for Cultural Activities under the name Ohel Shem. And the main function of this was to have Shabbat public meetings, which they call Oneg Shabbat Mesivot. And the president of this institute was no other than the famous poet Chaim Nachman Bialik. Bialik was a lover of Chazanut and learned to know Ravitz and admire him for his talent. He invited Ravitz to form a choir to perform at the Oneg Shabbat lectures. This is so fun, what I'm going to tell you now, and I wish that our world will be like this. They used to wait outside, the regular people, until the speakers were finished, and then the doors were open to admit the very many people who had come to hear Ravitz's choir with its superb choir and soloist and music. I would say that these days, at least in my synagogue, people come from the sermon and they wait for me to finish and then they come in to hear the sermon. Anyways, just a reflection. And so he served for 20 years as the Chazan of the great synagogue in Tel Aviv. Now, this first setting, obviously written by a Chazan, will have a part that is kind of like solo, which is the part cantor, that are the first 4 lines, and then the choir comes from the 5th line, and it's a more melodic part. So let me go through this quickly this setting from the top, Ramon. It goes something like this. El Melekh yoshev al kise rahamim מתנהג בחסידות, מוחל עוונות עמו, מעביר ראשון ראשון, מרבה מחילה לחטאים, וסליחה לפושעים, עושה צדקות עם כל בשר, עם כל בשר ברוח, לא חרתם תגמול, לא חרתם תגמול. Here's the part where the choir comes, a little bit more melodico. אלו רטה לנו, לומר 13, וזכור לנו היום, ברית 13, וזכור לנו היום, ברית 13, משה הורת לעולם מקרב. So that shows a little bit of the beauty of the compositions of rabbits, beautiful cantorial stuff going into a more melodic. That's one of the examples. Ramon, if you kindly enough, will go to the second melody. Beautiful, gorgeous melody for Mochel Abonot. If you have, by any chance, the text that we were going, it doesn't start exactly with El Melekh Yoshev. It skips the first 6 or 7 words and starts with Mochel Abonot. Yep. Exactly, beautiful. So if we skip El Melekh Yoshev al kise rahamim, for those who read Hebrew, Binlaech v'chasidut, this new setting starts in Mochel Abonot Amon, Ma'avir Rishon Rishon, Marmeh v'chila lechatay. Very good. So if you, Ramon, we can go kindly back to that. Now, for those who read music, the melody is actually the alto. This is beautiful because altos never get to sing the melody. And this is a beautiful thing that the composer or the arranger made. It goes something like this. Very melodic and very easy and beautiful to sing. Mochel abonot, mochel abonot amo, ma'avir rishon, rishon, marve bechina, lechatayim, וסליחה לפושעים, מרבה מחילה לחטאים, וסליחה לפושעים. Same melody with a little bit of the different text. עושה צדקות, עושה צדקות, עם כל בשר ברוח, לא חרתם תגמול, לא חרתם תגמול, לא חרתם תגמול, לא חרתם תגמול. Beautiful melody. Thank you so much.
Good. Bravo.
Thank you, Ramon. I don't know if you want to finish here or if you want to add one of your settings. I would love to hear one of your Sephardic settings for this.
Right. So why not? So let's see if I go to the text that you just have. Sephardim, especially, there's a beautiful setting from Turkey, from Istanbul, that actually takes the whole thing. It says, El Melekh yoshev al kise rahamim, ומתנהג בחסידות, מוחל עוונות עמו, מעביר ראשון ראשון, מרבה מחילה לחטאים וסליחה לפושעים, עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ברוח, ולא חרתם תגמול. לא נטע לנו לומר 13, זכור לנו היום ברית 13, כי הודעת לעניו מקדם, וכן כתוב בתורתך. וירד אדוני בענן, ויתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא אדוני, אדוני אל רחום וחנון, ערך אפיים ורב חסד באמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה.
Bravo, maestro.
Thank you so much. For those of you that are interested in that kind of makam of a Turkish mode, there are a number of YouTube versions of the Selihot from the Kotel, from Yerushalayim, from the temple, and many of these melodies are actually there. I understand there are a number of I'm going to get out of this to share the stop, and I see there are a few. Sur Resnick says Altos rule, and Jake Kohanak says this is completely different from the Sephardi melody. Now you have heard. Nan Wellen says to you, Elias, bravo. Joseph Barrios also says bravo, and Emily Blanc says Yofi, Toda Rabba Chazanim. So this is quite beautiful, Elias. Thank you so much for your contributions during this month of Elul. I wanted to remind everybody that this series of Selihot is actually being dedicated to my rabbi and mentor, Rabbi Mordechai Edrei, who actually taught me the Selihot since a young age. And I also want to say to all of you two things, that tomorrow, I'm saying this mischievously, I'm going to be teaching two different tefillot. One, Yehi Ratzon Milfanecha, the blessing for the new year, and then an Israeli song that went all the way to Eurovision by Nissan Friedman and Amos Barzel, called Kol Shana. I'll tell you more about that tomorrow, but it suffices to say that I hope that you all can come back for that series of tefillot, and we of course continue all the way until Thursday night. So Toda Rabba min halev. What comes from the heart, we say, enters the heart. Certainly, that's what you have given us, Elias.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, of course. And since we are in this time of Elul, we want to remind each other that this is the time that we have the accounting of our souls. May these prayers enhance that feeling of cheshbon hanefesh, and may all arrive to a place of shleimut, of completeness in our search for cleanliness. So now the only last thing I'm going to say is Laila Tov, good night to all of you. Have a good weekend, long weekend if you are in the United States. If you are in Argentina, every day is a weekend. No, just kidding. So thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you tomorrow
Thank
night.
you, Hasanim.
Thank
It was
you.
beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Tov, Shavua
Gracias,
Tov.
Elias.
Bye-bye.
Laila
Laila
Tov.
Tov, Shavua
Thank you,
Tov.
Erev Tov.
Erev